By now, most of you know that following weeks of open preparation, Russian President Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine this past Thursday. If we don't live in Russia, Ukraine, or anywhere in Eastern Europe, we may be under the impression that this conflict, as unfortunate as it is, won't really affect us. And so there's no real need to pay attention. However, I beg to differ. The implications of this invasion are far reaching than perhaps some of us may have considered. Not only will people tragically lose their lives, but the ideal of democracy and freedom may also become casualties. Make no mistake about it. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is hardly about Putin's desire to capture more territory and influence. It's really about toppling Western democracies, most notably the United States. In recent years, America has become increasingly divided over a variety of issues that mostly involve politics. Whether we are talking about presidential candidates, voting controversies, mask or vaccine mandates, Americans are undeniably divided. And because we are divided, we've placed the state of our democracy in grave danger. A divided country is a weak country. And no matter how painful it is to admit, America is weak today. And you don't have to be an American citizen to know this is true. Russia knows we're divided and weak, and so does China, which is why both of them are undermining us and our democratic principles. The New York Times recently released an article highlighting how Russia and China have been secretly conversing about the invasion of Ukraine, all while the Biden administration has been urging China to help them stop Russia. That's right. Russia and China are on the same team with their sights on breaking down America. Over 3 months, senior Biden administration officials held half a dozen urgent meetings with top Chinese officials in which the Americans presented intelligence showing Russia's troop buildup around Ukraine and beseeched the Chinese to tell Russia not to invade, according to US officials. So Biden and his team were talking to China, trying to persuade them to do something in prevention of Russia entering Ukraine. Each time, the Chinese officials, including the foreign minister and the ambassador to the United States, rebuffed the Americans, saying they did not think an invasion was in the works. China says, no, we're not going to do anything about Russia because we don't believe that they're going to invade the Ukraine. But get this. After one diplomatic exchange in December, US officials got intelligence showing Beijing had shared the information with Moscow, telling the Russians that the United States was trying to sow discord and that China would not try to impede Russian plans and actions. So, although China told the US that they don't believe Russia is going to invade Ukraine, they went behind our back and told Russia everything about our diplomatic talks and called us troublemakers. The Times goes on to say, some American officials say the ties between China and Russia appear stronger than at any time since the Cold War. The two now present themselves as an ideological front against the United States and its European and Asian allies, even as Mr. Putin carries out the invasion of Ukraine, whose sovereignty China has recognized for decades. We are now at a point to where two of the biggest anti-democratic powers are working against us. Two of the biggest powers that, by the way, have large economies and nuclear weapons. The fact is, democracy is not as safe as it once was, particularly here in America. Historically, this is what happens when a country becomes divided. In this country, we've been so busy fighting each other over trivial issues that we haven't even realized the degree of danger we're all in. Not to mention, the invasion of Ukraine is a humiliating defeat for the United States on its face. As the so-called leader of the free world with the largest and greatest military, President Biden made all sorts of threats of what would happen if Russia invaded Ukraine, how the consequences would be severe and massive. And yet, Russia invaded Ukraine anyway. Clearly, Putin does not take us seriously. So the severe consequence we choose to impose on Russia for invading Ukraine are more sanctions? That's like a child threatening to blow up his school, and his parents tell him, "Little Johnny, if you blow up your school, we're going to take your allowance away." Little Johnny says, "Forget that allowance," and blows up the school anyway. Take a look at the following clips where the Biden administration repeatedly say that the sanctions on Russia are a deterrent.
The purpose of the sanctions has always been and continues to be deterrence. But let's also recognize the unique nature of the sanctions that we have outlined. These are some of the greatest sanctions, if not the strongest, that we've ever issued.
The president believes that sanctions are intended to deter.
As to the sanctions, the most important thing we can do is to use them as a deterrent, as a means of dissuading Russia from engaging in further aggression.
To deter something is the act of discouraging an action or event through instilling doubt or fear of the consequences. That is to try and prevent it from taking place. Well, Russia has invaded Ukraine. Sanctions as a deterrent didn't work, and yet the Biden administration are continuing to use them as though they're working. Listen to what the president says just a few days following Russia's invasion when sanctions hadn't worked as planned.
No one expected the sanctions to prevent anything from happening. This is going to take time, and we have to show resolve so he knows what's coming. And so the people of Russia know what he's brought on them. That's what this is all about.
Although the sanctions imposed on Russia were initially characterized as severe and massive, we never really thought that they'd prevent anything. Right. It's past time for us to start paying attention to what's going on in the world. It doesn't matter where you are. What we see happening now in Eastern Europe is going to affect all of us in one way or another. Let us pray that this Russian aggression is swiftly brought to an end, some way, somehow, and that afterward, democracy and freedom won't continue to erode before our very eyes, potentially leaving us susceptible to an oppressive form of government like communism. I'm Javon Harris for Seek, and I thank you for watching.